Okay. Okay. So on behalf of ALS Edukemy, I welcome you to this wonderful session in anthropology. And this workshop is about how to prepare for and how to prepare anthropology optional for this UPSC main examination. I am Thirumurugan, and with me is Kavitha ma'am, an expert in biotechnology and tribal studies. So I'll be briefing you. Maybe you can just take a break and you can join us after some time. Okay. So this webinar is about where to begin, how to go ahead. Is there any special techniques to score more marks? So first of all, anthropology. I think 100% I'm sure most of you might not have heard the term anthropology subject called as anthropology, because at university level, right, this is not a very famous subject. It's not a very famous subject. And there are hardly 42 universities in the country which offers some curriculum in anthropology, that is not full-fledged course, some curriculum in anthropology. There are few universities which grant BA or BSc in anthropology. Hardly there are 40 universities. Why is it so? Why this subject is not so popular at college level? It is largely because of the scope of the subject. As per Alfred Kroeber, anthropology is the most scientific of all humanities, and it is the most humanistic of all sciences. In anthropology, we study about ourselves. Anthropology is the study of man through time and space. We are just going to study about us, about in the contemporary period, what exactly we are doing, how our society is like, about our culture, about our biology, etc. As well as through time. That means in the course of evolution. See, we human beings, right, we are a product of a few millions of years of evolution. And we reached our current anatomical form just some 20,000 years ago. In fact, it was during the Neolithic period, roughly some 10,000 years back, right? We got our current anatomical maturity. And this process of evolution, right, both biological as well as a cultural evolution, it continued from the past and it still continues. We are still evolving. Maybe after 1 million years, the Homo sapiens or we human beings, right, we may altogether be in a different form. We may not have the same form or same anatomical characteristics which we are having now. Kavitha, excuse me. Anthropology is such a wonderful subject. How the subject as such evolved. So exactly some 100 years back, anthropology, the Department of Anthropology, made its appearance in the University of Bombay University, Calcutta University, etc. By somewhere around 17th century, when the Europeans were familiar with the technology of steam navigation, they started venturing out. There were a few merchants who were looking for trade opportunities. There were a few travelers who had the hobby of traveling to far-flung areas. There were explorers who wanted to explore new areas to find new territories. In this process, the Europeans who ventured out, they managed to find some strange customs, some strange practices. They couldn't believe that there were few communities who are indulging in human sacrifice. There were few human beings who are cannibalistic. There are societies which are practicing polyandry, group marriages. And when they came back to their country, and when they shared their experiences with their friends and fellow people there, it created large-scale curiosity. And it is this curiosity which gave an impetus to the subject anthropology. Slowly, experts started studying the culture of people across the world. And this is how the subject as such originated. And by around the beginning of 20th century, anthropology became an academic curriculum in most of the important universities. But still, why it is not so popular? It's largely because of the scope of the subject. The scope of the subject is very vast. Broadly, right, anthropology can be classified into physical or biological anthropology. We also have socio-cultural anthropology, which deals with the culture and the society. In physical or biological anthropology, we discuss in length about the human evolution, organic evolution. We study about applied human genetics. Then we have linguistic anthropology. Then we also have archaeological anthropology. And finally, the fifth one, that is applied anthropology. So whatever we have studied in the physical anthropology, the socio-cultural anthropology, linguistic anthropology, and archaeological anthropology, how we are going to apply it for the benefit of the human beings, or benefit of for the humankind. That is applied anthropology. The scope is very vast. In one area, right, we'll be discussing about human culture, society, marriage, family, kinship, religion, about the economic aspects of different societies. We discuss also how political system evolved over time. On the other hand, we also discuss the evolution of human beings, both biological and cultural evolution over time. So we discuss how few million years back, how we were like, and how our ancestors were like, and through subsequent stages, how we descended and how we reached the current form. So we also discuss how culture as such evolved over time. This is one part of anthropology. And in the other part, we have, in biological anthropology, we discuss applied human genetics. We discuss human ecology, in which we discuss in length about the human ecological adjustments to various climatic regions or various environmental conditions, like a hot desert, like a very cold and high altitude climate, etc. So it's not always possible to have all the laboratories in one simple arts college, so that you can have a department of anthropology. On one side, right, we'll be dealing with the dating of the artifacts which our archaeologists have unearthed. And there are a number of techniques which we use actually. See, radiocarbon dating, electron spin resonance dating, We have thermoluminescence dating, and this needs huge laboratories with sophisticated instruments. At the same time, right, we also deal with the DNA fingerprinting, recombinant DNA technology, gene therapy. So we need a good number of specialists here along with an elaborate laboratory. This is what makes it difficult for an ordinary arts and science college to have a department of anthropology. What makes it more interesting is the research methodology in anthropology. So unlike the research in other subjects, other humanities, anthropologists are not expected to do the research in the same way a psychologist or a sociologist used to do. The research technique or the research methodology in anthropology, right, is altogether different. We call this as a participant observation. So even the research methodology, right, it got evolved over time. And it's like if you want to study a particular society, a culture of a particular society, it is not that you can carry a questionnaire with you, go there, conduct an interview, collect the details, and come back. It's like one need to mix with that society. So one need to have a good idea about the native language. He should be in a position to converse with them in their language. And he is expected to be there with them at least for 2 years so that he'll be in a position to understand a number of life cycle rituals. And even in this process, he need to mix with the society. Anthropologists also proudly call that one need to drink with them, one need to dance with them so that he will be in a position to extract the actual information from the people, and that information from the native people's point of view, not what you view or not. It's not your opinion about somebody else's culture. So if you're studying somebody else's culture, that opinion should be from that own society. This is what we call it as a participant observation. So this is what makes the subject so complex, and it is not always possible for an ordinary arts and science college to have a department of anthropology. We always have, we can see the department of anthropology in big universities like Madras University, Bombay University, Mysore University, etc. So this difficulty gives us an advantage in this UPSC examination. So you are not going to do any practicals in the main examination. Everything is going to be theoretical. Even if they ask you to write about recombinant DNA technology, you are not going to isolate any genetic fragments. You are not going to load it into a vector. You are not going to move it to the target organism. We are not going to fix it there. Just we are going to write theoretically. What is recombinant DNA technology, recombining the genetic materials, how we are going to do that. So isolate the required genetic materials. You can cut the genetic materials through genetic scissors. There are few enzymes called as restriction endonuclease, which we use to cut these fragments. After cutting that, incorporate that into a plasmid vector. There is no need to know what a plasmid vector is here. We're not going to do any research about what a plasmid vector is and how it is going to carry the genetic materials. Just you write, incorporate this into a plasmid vector, move it to the target organism, and get it fixed there. So how we can paste it there? Again, we have a number of paste like ligase. Ligase is an enzyme which we can use to paste these genetic fragments. And now the target organism acquired some new genes. So it becomes a genetically modified organism. How easy? Theoretically, right? Anybody can write about recombinant DNA technology or DNA fingerprinting. But suppose if they are going to ask us to do any practicals in UPSC examination, I will tell you anthropology will be the toughest optional. Be the toughest optional. Now let us discuss for a beginner. Suppose after giving your prelims, right, now you will start your preparation for the main examination. So how to go ahead? One important thing which you need to keep in mind is it's not that anthropology is very easy. Many keep saying that anthropology is very easy. If it is so, anthropology is very easy, right? Then everyone will opt for the subject. We know that there is a good amount of science in anthropology. So like every other optional subject, even there are pros and cons in anthropology. At the same time, there are few advantages which are so peculiar only to anthropology that I will brief you shortly. So where to begin? If you say that start from culture theory, so that's a very, very bad idea. Very bad idea. I'll tell you first, go through the syllabus thoroughly. Just read it once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, spend some time with that. Also try to collect the last 5 years question paper, mains paper, and try to go through that also for some time. So try to spend some time with the syllabus and the previous year question paper before starting your actual preparation. So while glancing the syllabus, right, you can feel few things. There are few topics, right? You may think that these are very easy. This I can do. At the same time, there will be few topics, right? These are something very new to me. I think I need to spend more time for this. You may get some idea that at least there are few topics which are tough, which are very tough, which are which are easy, or which may be in between this. So try to identify this. And I'll tell you the best place to start is, but one important thing, many write what they will do, they'll start from chapter number 1.1 in paper 1. And they will go towards chapter number 12. That is a general line, general order of or how the syllabus has been made. Lot of technicality or technical things have been there in designing the syllabus. I don't know who made this. If anybody, right, who is having a good idea in science, if somebody is, even if he's from a science background, if you glance the syllabus once, right, in the very front page, see, there are topics like primate taxonomy, primate behavior, quaternary and tertiary fossil primates, comparative anatomy of man and apes, comparative anatomy of man and apes. What is this? Does this mean that one need to be thorough in human anatomy? And after that, one need to read the anatomy of apes, living apes, and fossil primates, so that we'll be in a position to compare this. How it is possible? In MBBS, right, people read anatomy in 1 full semester. So that is not the case here actually. The syllabus, see, the main aim of keeping all these things in the very front page is to create some sort of fear that anthropology is going to be a very tough, it's going to be very tough. And see, this chapter number 1.6, phylogenetic status, characteristics and geographical distribution of the following. Plio-Pleistocene hominids in South and East Africa. What is this? Many will feel, is this written in English or Mandarin? Because, right, you may not be familiar with the terms like a phylogenetic status. What do you mean by phylogenetic status? What do you mean by Plio-Pleistocene, etc. And see, the very first chapter, meaning, scope, and development of anthropology, and that will be followed by relationship with other disciplines. That means we are going to compare anthropology with medical sciences, with humanities, right? Without knowing what is anthropology. Certainly, these are not the topics to begin with. After that, right, once again, main branches, socio-cultural anthropology, biological anthropology, archaeological anthropology, just keep all these things. So I will tell you, there are few areas in anthropology which are very, very important, and you are not supposed to miss these chapters, or if there is a question from this area, you are not supposed to leave it in choice. These are the fossil primates. Our syllabus, right, includes Australopithecus, Homo erectus, we have Neanderthals, we have Homo heidelbergensis, that is a Heidelberg jaw, Rhodesian man. We also discuss about the Cro-Magnon man, Grimaldi man, and Chancellide man. At the same time, right, we also have, we need to discuss Ramapithecus and Sivapithecus and Narmada man in paper 2. So these are the fossil primates, and these are something very, very, very important in anthropology. So if someone started preparation from chapter number 1, and when they move towards chapter number 12, they may get stuck in this area. And in the process, right, you'll be spending a lot of time of finishing these. On most of the easy chapters behind, right, you may not be in a position to cover in time. So my best advice is, when you make a plan for 5 days or 1 week. While doing so, identify some topic from, or try to pick some topic from these fossil primates, say Australopithecus. Then there are few other topics which you can now focus on. To begin with, right, chapters like religion, marriage, family, kinship can be clubbed into one plan. So I always advise people to start from chapter number 5, religion, which deals with anthropological approaches. See here, we are not going to study any philosophy here. We're not going to study any philosophy in the religion. Okay. One important thing which we need to keep in mind is the subject anthropology is largely skewed towards the study of primitive people. We call them the tribes. So here our focus will be much about religion from our the forms of religion found among the primitive people. And I'll tell you, some 100 years back, most of this form of worship were very common among the primitive people, but now because of the development of technology, development of communication and transportation facilities, most of the primitive people got assimilated with the mainstream culture, and it is very hard to differentiate them. It is hard to classify them, but still there are people who still follow the primitive way of living. For example, the Sentinels of Andaman Islands. We have 2 islands, North Sentinel and South Sentinel Islands. These Sentinels, they occupied this territory, and it is a remote, isolated island. And I don't know how many of you will believe that they are the only living Paleolithic people in the world. They are yet to use any metal, and they are isolated. They do not have any contact with outsiders. Hardly 1 or 2, right, managed to penetrate into them, and just they had some glimpse of these people. But that is not the case with most of the tribes who live in the mainland. Even the most primitive of primitive people, like the Chenchus of the Nallamala Hills in Andhra Pradesh, the Bills, the Hos, the Mundas, they all got assimilated. So now we cannot clearly distinguish the primitive traits among them. But in our syllabus, right, the content which we are going to discuss will be the condition which existed some 100 years back. So one very important advantage here is there will be no need for you to update anything. So you can start your preparation from the chapter religion, and you can pick one ape on the other side. There is one more thing which is very, very important in anthropology, that is the anthropological theories. Anthropological theories. You know what is culture? So, the simplest definition for culture was given by a cultural ecologist. According to them, culture is nothing but the man's adaptation to the environment. But culture, right, is just sum total of the knowledge, belief, morals, arts, customs, etc., which man acquires by being a part of a society. If somebody is a part of West Bengal, so he is a Bengali, and being a part of that society, he has an opportunity to learn the Bengali language from their parents, from their relatives, from their friends, from their teachers, etc. And this Bengali language, right, it didn't evolve over time. Few thousand years, right, we kept improving, we kept enriching the language, and we managed to reach the current form. I'll tell you one example for this. For example, the English language which we speak. We learned it from our parents. We learned it from our teachers. And in our generation, what we are doing, we'll keep it with ourselves. We will enrich that, and we'll pass it on to the next generation. See how we are enriching it. We are adding a number of new vocabulary, right? Selfie. Selfie is something very new term, right? This was not so common a term before 10 or 15 years. Selfie. We have added a new vocabulary. ROFL. Okay. So like that, right, we keep adding a number of new vocabulary, and we are enriching it, and we'll pass it on to the next generation. Culture is learned. One cannot make his own culture. Generally, we learn culture. For example, the dress which we wear. If somebody is left there in the middle of a desert or in the middle of a forest, like our Jungle Book hero Mowgli, is it possible for him to speak a language in his lifetime? Is it possible for him to know the art of raising a cotton crop, extract the lint out of it, so make it a fiber, weave it into a cloth, and stitching it into a dress? It is not possible in a lifetime. Our ancestors, some 10,000 years back, right, somehow they managed to find the art of doing this. And slowly, with every passing generation, right, we try to improve the quality of the fiber, the quality of the material. And now we have the ultra soft, ultra fine dress to wear. This is something which got evolved over time. We didn't invent these outrightly. These are things which got evolved over time. And we learned this art from our ancestors or from the previous generation. We are enriching it in our generation. How we are enriching it? From zero dress level, we have reached this level. And now in our current generation, right, how we are going to improve this particular aspect of culture? We are tearing it here, and we are making new fashion, and we are passing it on to the next generation. This is culture. Okay, culture is learned. Culture keeps evolving. So there are a number of theories about culture. It starts from classical evolutionism. In fact, the classical evolutionists, they were the first to give a theory in culture. So according to them, culture always evolves in a unilinear sequence, stage after stage. They have also elaborated few concepts like the psychic unity of mankind, the concept of survivals, parallels. Here starts something which is very important and which is something very crucial in anthropology, the culture theories. It starts from classical evolutionism, it moves on. Next, it should be diffusionism. So once when you finish classical evolutionism, then do not take historical particularism by Franz Boas. Next, it should be diffusionism. We have three schools again here, British school, German school, and American school of diffusion. So after finishing classical evolutionism followed by diffusionism, then it is advisable to take historical particularism. Then we can go further ahead. Structural functionalism, functionalism, structuralism, cultural materialism, culture and personality, cognitive anthropology, and then see we have symbolic and interpretive theory, something very interesting. How symbols carry their culture, how symbols instigate social action. Yes, right. In our day-to-day life, we use a number of symbols. When we play cricket, if the umpire raises the hand like this, that is a symbol. It shows that you are out and you need to walk out. You need to walk back to the pavilion. So during marriages, if it is a Christian marriage, both the bride and groom will exchange a ring. This is a symbol. This symbol instigates a social action. According to Hindu traditions in South India, the groom will tie a nuptial knot in the neck of the bride. This is again a symbol and this symbol instigates social action. What is that? They are married now. They can go to honeymoon and they can start their married life. Many start their married life with a lot of anticipation, a lot of expectation. We'll discuss in length what exactly happened. There is one topic which deals exclusively about marriage. Then we have cognitive theory by Taylor and Conklein, and finally postmodernism. This is something very, very, very critical in anthropology, and these two topics. Number one, that fossil primates, Australopithecus down up to Narmada man, and the culture theories, classical evolutionism down up to postmodernism. One cannot finish it at a stretch. One need to plan in such a way that we'll be doing these two topics simultaneously, and it may take at least 2 to 3 months for you to get your hold over this. So when you make a small plan, so try to take some easy topic, like try to pick some topic from socio-cultural anthropology, maybe religion, or maybe economic anthropology, or maybe political anthropology. And along with that, try to add one A, say Australopithecus or Homo erectus. And maybe after some time, right, in maybe the next plan, along with a few topics in socio-cultural anthropology, you can add one culture theory. So culture theory, right? There are few books available in the market. For example, the one written by Upadhyaya and Pandey. But that book is bit lengthy and it is so elaborate. And I wish that at the earliest possible time you start preparing this culture theories. And it is this, right, which will give you a lot of insights into what culture is and how you need to go ahead with the topics in socio-cultural anthropology. But keep in mind, one cannot start the culture theory and finish it over time. This is a slow process. So make it sure that throughout your preparation, right, you'll be studying one or other culture theory. Same is the case with the apes also. Then there are a few topics which are totally, you can say, unique and which do not have any connection. You can say mutually exclusive. Excuse me. You can also identify these topics. I'll tell you one example. You have ecological anthropology, chapter number 9.7, concepts and the methods of ecological anthropology. There is no need to have any prior idea in science as well as culture to study this particular topic. Only thing is one need to have some idea about human physiology, at least about our respiratory system and about our circulatory system. That is sufficient. But nowhere in the syllabus, right, will be studying human physiology. But to understand human ecological adaptation or ecological adjustments, right, one need to have some idea at least about how we inhale and the lungs, right, how air gets diffused from alveoli. What is an alveoli? From alveoli, how it gets diffused to the blood. What do you mean by partial pressure? And how it happens? What happens when we go to highlands? Under hypoxic condition, right, when the oxygen level goes down, how our body is going to get acclimatized with this situation. See, earlier, right, maybe some 100 years back, we had no good idea about the atmospheric condition in higher altitude. Few French balloonists, what they did, they tried to do few experiments, and 4 of them descended up in the atmosphere using a hot air balloon. They didn't even reach the height of Mount Everest. But it was a sudden movement from the ground level, and they reached roughly around 8,000 meters above the sea level, from where they descended down. When they descended down, it was a shock for the people there, because 3 out of the 4 men who ascended up were dead altogether, and the only one person who survived, right, even he became permanently deaf, but still he was alive to narrate what exactly happened when they ascended up. How the other 3 couldn't cope up with the hypoxic condition, there is less oxygen. So how our body, see, then it gave us some idea, okay, there is something wrong in the upper atmosphere. Any altitude above, the altitude above 6,000 meter, right, is called as a dead zone. And hardly we have any human permanent habitation beyond 6,000 meters above the sea level. And nobody can live here, and only, right, people who want to scale peaks like Mount Everest or Annapurna or K2, they will cross this 6,000 meter line, that is dead zone. They'll go there inside, but once when they scale the peak, they cannot stay there for a long time. They need to descend back immediately. It is largely because of the very less amount of oxygen there. It is hypoxic condition. So this is one chapter, chapter number 9.7, concepts and methods of ecological anthropology, where we will where we need to study about the Benjamin's rule, Allen's rule, okay, and how human body get adjusted to various environmental extremes. Various environmental extremes. There are two ways of adjusting to these environmental extremes. One is by acclimatization and another one is adaptation. So what is this acclimatization? What is this adaptation? Change of water, right? So this is one topic, right, which is not having any link with the other topic. That means there is no need to don't to do any basics to study this thing. So like this, there are a few more topics. For example, see here, demographic theories. Chapter number 11.2. These are theories which deals with the population. We have social, biological, and cultural theories of population. So in this, right, we will discuss about Malthusian theory of population, Marxian theory of population, demographic transition theory, then food fertility nexus theory, then food density related theories. And there is no need to have any prior idea about anything in anthropology to study these things. There are few more like these, let me tell you. Chromosomal aberrations. Chapter number 9.4. It deals with a number of chromosomal aberrations, structural and numerical aberrations. To study this, right, if you have some idea how many pairs of chromosomes we have, what is an autosome, what is an allosome, that is what are body chromosomes, what are sex chromosomes, that is sufficient. So here what exactly is the problem in the chromosomes? Is there any part which is missing? Or is there any chromosome which gets duplicated here? And as a result, right, there is a minor alteration or minor aberration in your chromosome. So what are all the symptoms one is going to express? In Down syndrome. So what are all the symptoms and what we can expect from that individual? In a Cri-du-Chat syndrome, what exactly we can expect from the individual? And here, our anthropology, right, the focus of anthropology is human well-being. So here we are not going to discuss in length about, say, DNA replication, protein synthesis, or polymerase chain reaction, etc., to understand these chromosomal aberrations. Just if you know just if you have some idea about just the number of chromosomes and how the modifications in this is going to affect the biology of an individual, that is sufficient. So Cri-du-Chat syndrome means what exactly is that aberration and whether that kid is going to survive or not. No, it's not. There is no chance for a kid with a Cri-du-Chat syndrome to survive. And once when a doctor identifies that this kid is having Cri-du-Chat syndrome, we can confirm that through karyotyping. Karyotyping means studying the chromosomes. So once when you confirm through karyotyping that yes, this kid is suffering from a chromosomal aberration, then the duty of the doctor here is to do a genetic counseling to the parents. Like, see, do not get emotionally attached with your kid. Your kid is suffering from such a genetic abnormality, and we cannot expect this baby to survive beyond 6 or 7 months, because see, there are a number of congenital abnormalities here. There will be congenital heart abnormalities, kidney abnormalities. As a result, a baby born with such a syndrome cannot survive beyond 6 or 7 months. So here the duty of an anthropologist and a doctor is to do a genetic counseling, so that the parents will not get emotionally attached with the kids, and they'll be mentally prepared to deal with the situation. So there is no need to read anything prior to this to understand the chromosomal aberrations. See, in fact, right, anthropologists, they play a major role in making the population healthy. There is one concept called as eugenics, which we'll be discussing in applied anthropology. We have positive eugenics and negative eugenics. So negative eugenics means it deals with preventing the perpetuation of a harmful or a lethal gene in a population. Suppose if somebody is identified with a disease like phenylketonuria or Huntington's chorea. Chorea is a very deadly disease, and it expresses late, actually, after 45 or 50 years. If suppose if a person is identified with Huntington's chorea, sorry, chorea, it leads to neurodegeneration. Along with that, the symptoms are sometimes become very pathetic, like a person cannot have control over his body movements. He'll keep making some jerky body movements. Sometimes we may even feel that whether that guy is performing a breakdance or what. Once I saw one extreme case where hospital staffs tried to manage to make one person with Huntington's chorea to sit in a chair. They couldn't manage to make him sit in a chair. He jumped out of the chair, he fell down, and he was making jerky body movements. This is again a lethal disease, and the problem with this particular disease is it expresses itself at a later stage. But if somebody is identified with the disease, then an anthropologist or a doctor may give a genetic counseling to them, saying, see, you are carrying these genes. And do you want to pass on these genes to your kids? Do you want your kids also to suffer with the disease when they reach 40 or 45 years of age? Why can't you think about adoption? If you go ahead with that, right? Great. See, we can prevent this harmful gene from spreading. That gene will die with you. This we call it as negative eugenics. So this is one very important role of anthropologists to make a population healthier, biologically fit. So like this, there are few topics which do not have any link with the other topics. But on the other hand, right, suppose if you discuss applied anthropology, one need to have a good knowledge about race and racism. One need to have good knowledge about human morphological variations. There are morphological variations, right? The helmet which Sachin Tendulkar uses to play, Brian Lara cannot use the same helmet. His head is having a different shape, different form. So what these variations are, is it possible to group people into a discrete group? So applied anthropology, right, it needs a prior knowledge about a number of things in physical anthropology. So that is one thing which we cannot read in isolation. But there are a few topics like these chromosomal aberrations, the concept of human ecology. Then we also have race and racism, demographic theories. Even there are a few topics which deals with the menarche, menopause, and bio-events of fertility. These are the topics, right? There is no need to have any prior knowledge to master this and try to pick these topics and read it thoroughly. Then comes the very big advantage in anthropology, that is paper 2. In most of the optional subject, right, whatever we discuss in paper 1, that we will be applying it in Indian context in paper 2. But good thing in anthropology is, yes, we are going to focus much about India in paper 2. The first part of paper 2, right? The first part of paper 2 deals with the traditional Indian social system. That is the basis of a traditional Indian social system. And one good thing about our anthropologists are the people who made the syllabus, right? While making the syllabus here, even in this basis of the traditional Indian social system, they made it sure that we are going to study only the Hindu social system. Buddhism, Jainism, etc. originated in India only. And even Islam and Christianity is more than 1,000 years old in our country. But our examiners are really so kind enough to include only the Hindu social system in our syllabus. That we are not going to focus much about the philosophy, except in few topics where we discuss about the concept of Purushartha, rebirth, etc. So we study about caste system, village as a social system. There is some amount of prehistory also. We discuss about the Harappan civilization and the prehistoric culture in India, like the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, Chalcolithic, etc. So there is no need to have a good knowledge in paper 1 to do this. And the second part of anthropology, paper 2 in anthropology, deals with the tribal studies. Kavitha ma'am will now discuss in length about what these things are, and also about a few content in biological anthropology. She's an expert in biotechnology. She keeps saying that I can teach these things up to molecular level, but we need to refrain because refrain from doing this, because this is not biotechnology, but this is anthropology. So there are few other critical things of which one thing I will tell you now. See, paper 2 is something which is very easy. Most of the time people do this particular mistake. They start focusing on the paper 1 and they'll be neglecting the paper 2. And towards the end, right, they'll start reading paper 2. That's a very wrong method. Because even for paper 2, we have 250 marks, and paper 1, we have 250 marks. In a matter of 1 month, right, a person will be in a position to finish paper 2. So give equal importance to paper 2 also from the beginning itself. From the beginning itself. Okay. So now Kavitha ma'am will discuss with you about few aspects of in this tribal study in paper 2, as well as in applied human genetics. So in the end, right, once again, I'll be back here, and I will discuss few very important things, like there are few things which are so specific to anthropology. So that I'll brief you towards the end, few advantages which we have in anthropology, which we do not have in other subjects. What exactly that is, how it is scoring, and why and how people manage to get more marks in these. That I'll be doing it maybe in a matter of time, once when Kavitha ma'am finishes her lecture. Okay. So now let us ask Kavitha ma'am to continue the discussion.
Very good afternoon to all of you. I'm Kavitha. Along with Sir, I'll be teaching anthropology here. So Sir has given you very good insights already about how to go ahead with Anthropology Optional. I will be giving you a few more inputs. First and foremost, since most of you all, if you're watching this, you have chosen to take up anthropology, or still you're in a dilemma whether you need to choose anthropology as your optional or not, isn't it? So by now you would have done some amount of research. At least I would say you people are fortunate enough, because you at least get these kind of workshops to get to know what are the different optional subjects, what exactly do we study in that, what is the scope of that subject, how to study that subject, right? What are the books which you need to refer? And I should tell you that much of this guidance was not available to students even just few years back. Even when I was preparing, I didn't have much of these options. So what we used to do is we used to choose some 3 or 4 optional subjects. We used to buy 1 or 2 books from each of these, and we used to read it once or twice, discuss with our peers or friends, and then choose. But fortunately, now we have the option of having workshops wherein we give you much in-depth knowledge about what the subject is all about, whether it is interesting you, whether you have passion towards the subject or not, right? So I would tell you to kindly utilize these workshops to make a wise decision. First and foremost, anthropology. Anthropology is the study of human beings, isn't it? And that is what makes it so interesting. Can there be anything much more interesting than study of our own self? No, isn't it? So we know that even sociology, we discuss about society. Even in psychology, we study about the human mind. And in medicine, we study about the physiology of the human body. So like this, even though there are various disciplines which study anthropology from their own angle, right? Anthropology is a holistic subject wherein we study human beings from all angles. That is, here we study the genetic aspects of human beings, right? So we study various genetic disorders and so on. We study the human mind. Then we also study the human society. That is, we discuss topics in sociocultural anthropology like family, marriage, kinship, and so on. Then we also discuss about the human culture, society and culture. We discuss about the evolutionary aspects of man. That is, we discuss the evolution of man both in time and space, right? So in addition to that, we also discuss about the Indian society in paper 2, and we also discuss about various tribal society, where various tribes in India and abroad, in India and in other countries. Okay, so what are the different tribes in India? How are they unique? What is their culture? What is their level of development, progress, and so on? We also discuss the various development schemes, programs, and so on. So sir has already probably given you enough of insights about the topics in paper 1, right? So about the nature of culture, the topics in sociocultural anthropology, like marriage, family, kinship, economic organization, political organization, and so on. So in addition to that, we have a very important topic in anthropology paper 1, that is anthropological theories. So whichever optional you choose, you will definitely have theories or thinkers. And in most subjects, the students find that it is these topics which are quite challenging. I would not say it is difficult, they are quite challenging. Take public administration or political science or any optional, you will have thinkers or theories, and it is little challenging to understand these topics. But however, I can tell you, with the proper guidance and by going to the right material and the right books, and if you attend the classes and understand the theories, they are very, very easy and you can write very good answers. So one important thing which you need to keep in mind when you're preparing for anthropology is you have to prioritize anthropological theories and topics in physical anthropology over other topics. So by this, I'm not saying that you should completely neglect other topics. Say in paper 1, we have topics in physical anthropology, we have topics in apes, we have human genetics, which again comes under physical anthropology, we have culture theories, that is anthropological theories, and we also have topics in sociocultural sociocultural anthropology like family, marriage, kinship. Now, say when you are taking up your examination, you have a choice between two questions. So one question is from apes part or culture theory part, and in the option you have another question which comes from sociocultural anthropology, say family, marriage, or kinship. So in these cases, what you'll have to ideally do is you will have to choose the topic from apes or physical anthropology or culture theory. So it is very easily see the topics in sociocultural anthropology like family, marriage, kinship, they are very easy, be it political organization, economic organization. So any student will read that, and even if he is not very well prepared, he can definitely make a good answer out of that. So when more number of students are opting for that question, you will get an average score. Whereas it is these challenging topics, I would not say they are difficult, it is these challenging topics like the apes, the physical anthropology, and the culture theory part, which sets you apart from rest of the people. So this is where you can show a difference and you can have an edge over the other competitors. So if you take up the just by taking up the questions, by attempting the questions from any of these challenging topics itself gives you an edge. And if you can make a good answer in these topics, then you can definitely be the top scorer. Okay, so culture theories are very interesting and it is not that challenging as people make it to be. Okay, so culture theories, we'll be discussing classical evolutionism, historical particularism, functionalism, structural functionalism, culture and personality school, diffusionism, postmodernism, and so on. So each of these will be discussed in detail so that you understand it and you have a very good hold on these topics, which are very important in paper 1. Then we will also be discussing we'll also be discussing all the topics in physical anthropology in human genetics part. So now a common query among students is we have studied biology or we have studied science only up to 10th standard, and after that we moved into different streams, either commerce or arts or other subjects. So we have lost touch of science. Is it possible for us to get back to these science topics like human genetics, physical anthropology, cell biology? So when we go through the syllabus copy, we read very technical terms like here Mendelian genetics in man family study, single factor, multi-factor, Hardy-Weinberg law, chromosomal aberrations. We don't even remember what a chromosome is, what a cell is. So is it really possible for us to get back to all these biology topics and study it once again and still get a good score? Trust me, it is definitely possible, because when we are beginning human genetics, we will not straight away begin with chromosomal aberrations. What is Cry-Ducat syndrome? What is Down syndrome? What is Turner syndrome? Right? So we will be beginning from the very basics. And I will tell you that most of these topics you will definitely be covering even under your GS for both prelims as well as mains. So even in general studies, you have to study science part, isn't it? You just cannot omit it altogether. So it is the same case here also. We will be beginning right from the basics, right from what is a cell, what is the different cell organelles, what is cell division, mitotic division, meiotic division, and slowly we'll build up over that. It is not like we just straight away take up topics which you cannot understand. We will build from the foundation. We will go from the basics, from what is a cell, what is cell division, what are chromosomes, so what is the structure of chromosome. So when there is a change either in the number or the structure of chromosome, we call it as chromosomal aberration, isn't it? We know how many chromosomes we have. How many chromosomes do we have? We have 23 pairs of chromosomes, isn't it? So if there is a change in the number of chromosomes, that is, instead of 23 pairs, if we have 1 or 2 extra chromosomes, or if we have 1 or 2 chromosomes less in number, say instead of 23 pairs, you have a few additional chromosomes, or there are few chromosomes which are missing, then we call it as numerical aberrations. So what happens? So there are different syndromes. Again, here we will not be discussing every single syndrome. There are hundreds and hundreds of syndromes, and we will not be discussing all of that. We will limit our discussion only to the syndromes which have been mentioned in the syllabus copy, right? We will be discussing numerical and structural aberrations. I already told you what we mean by numerical aberration. When there is a change in the number of the chromosomes. Instead of 23 pairs, that is, we have 22 pairs of autosomes and 1 pair of sex chromosome, isn't it? So autosomes are also called as body chromosomes, and 1 pair of sex chrome is X and X in females and 1 X and 1 Y chromosome in males, isn't it? So this is the normal number of chromosomes which is present in any adults. That is 22 autosomes plus X and X in females and 22 autosomes plus X and Y in males. So if there is a change in this, either if there is a change in the number of the chromosomes or suppose in the structure. So I will also be discussing about the structure of the chromosome. You know how the typical structure of a regular normal chromosome looks like. Suppose there is a change in any structure, a part of the P arm might be missing, as in case of 5p minus syndrome, right? So those cases we call it as structural aberrations. So again here I'm repeating, we will not be discussing so many different syndromes which are present, which is present. We have the limited number of aberrations which have been mentioned in the syllabus, like the Klinefelter syndrome, Turner syndrome, superfemale, and autosomal aberrations like Down syndrome, Edward, Patau, and Cry-Ducat syndrome. So whatever only the syndromes which have been mentioned in the syllabus, only those we will be discussing. And even in these syndromes, we will not discuss in depth about what exactly happens. Very briefly, we will be discussing what is the anomaly that is present in each of this syndrome. First and foremost, is it a numerical aberration or is it a structural aberration? Then in case of numerical aberration, whether it happens in the autosome, okay, or it is in the allosomes. And then in those children, what are the abnormalities which we can identify? So physically, how they look different, whether there's mental retardation, whether they have droopy eyelids, whether they have web neck features, okay, whether they are mentally challenged or not. So all these few abnormalities we will be discussing, and we will also discuss what are the treatment options that is available for them. So it is a very simple and very interesting chapter which anybody can understand very easily. Further, we will also be discussing the genetic imprints in human disease, genetic screening, genetic counseling, and human DNA profiling. So when you read this, these words in the syllabus copy, you feel like, what is this? Is it so difficult? They say genetic imprints in human disease. What is this imprints? What do you mean by imprints? We've only heard about thumbprints so far, isn't it? So what is this genetic imprint? How do I comprehend all this? Should I even, will it be very difficult for me to understand? Let me tell you, it's a very, very simple topic. Genetic imprints. What do you mean by genetic imprints? Genetic imprinting means, as I already told you, we get 1 pair of chromosomes, isn't it? We have totally 23 pairs of chromosomes in us, out of which 1 pair comes from the father and 1 pair comes from the mother. So we inherit genes from our parents, and these genes which we inherit from our parents are responsible for various characters in us, isn't it? Be it our skin color, the hair texture, the length of our nose, the breadth of our nose, right? Our stature, whether we are tall, whether we are short, and whether we are, most of our physical features, everything is decided based on the genes which we inherit from our parents. Similarly, the expression of certain genes also depends on our parents. That is, there is a differential expression of genes depending upon the parent from whom we are inheriting that gene. This is called as genetic imprinting. I will repeat once again so that you can understand it clearly. The differential expression of a gene depending upon the parent from whom we are inheriting the gene is called as genetic imprinting. So there are certain genes which we inherit from our parents, be it our father or our mother, which are responsible for giving us diseases also, isn't it? So I already told you, it is not just the physical features which we get from the genes which we inherit from our parents. That is true. Our height, our skin color, our hair texture, the length and breadth of our nose, our eye shape, our stature, all of this depends on the genes which we inherit from our parents. In addition to this, there are other genetic disorders, other diseases which also are inherited from the genes, isn't it? So there are certain genes which we can get from both father and mother, and both of them are capable of creating a disease in us, right? So what happens when we say, or what do we mean when we say differential expression? When we say differential expression, it means if we are inheriting that particular gene from one parent, it expresses in a different way in comparison to how it would express if we are inheriting the same gene from the other parent. Let me simplify it for you. So there are certain genes. Let me give the example of Huntington chorea. Huntington chorea is a neurodegenerative disorder which occurs at an older age. So already sir has given you a good discussion about how a person suffering from Huntington's chorea will behave. So here it is a neurodegenerative disorder wherein the person makes jerky body movements. So just like how I'm sitting here on the chair, it will not be possible for a person suffering from Huntington's chorea to sit stable and talk or do any activity. His limbs, that is the hands, neck, legs, all of them will start moving without his control, that is involuntarily. We might think that probably he is just dancing, or you can even find many people assuming that probably that person is drunk or high and that is why he is behaving like that. But no, that is not the reason. The reason is the person cannot control, that is without his control over his limbs, his entire body keeps moving because it is a neurodegenerative disorder. So this is called as Huntington's chorea. So the genes for Huntington's chorea can either come from your father or from your mother. When the genes for this disease comes from your father, then the possibility of you getting the disease is at the age of around 40 to 45 years. Whereas if you get the same genes from your mother, you will get this disease at the age of around 60 to 65 years. Okay, did you understand? The disease is the same. That is, you will be getting Huntington's chorea. But if you're getting the genes for this disease from your father, the onset of the disease will occur around the age of 40 to 45 years. And if you're acquiring this gene for the disease from your mother, then the onset of the disease will begin around 60 to 65 years. So this is what we mean by differential expression. So it is the same gene which is causing the same disease. However, if you're getting it from your father, you're getting the onset of the disease at an earlier age. Whereas if the gene is coming from your mother, then you're getting the disease at a later age. So now you might ask me, ma'am, then is there any changes in how the disease, or is there a change in the symptoms of the disease? No, there's not much changes in the symptoms of the disease. However, we can only notice a change in the age at which the onset of the disease occurs. So now you might ask me, so what exactly is happening here? Why is it that we are getting the same disease at different ages when we are inheriting the gene from a different parent, right? So the reason for this is differential methylation of DNA, right? So here we will be discussing in brief what is methylation of DNA. That is addition of a methyl group, that is CH3. Addition of methyl group in DNA is called as DNA methylation. And very briefly, I will be telling you what DNA methylation is. However, we will not be discussing all of this at the molecular level. Let me tell you, if we have to discuss DNA methylation, it is one entire chapter in molecular biology, which we studied during our college days. So here we are not studying biotechnology. We are not studying a degree in biotechnology or a degree in genetics. Instead, we are studying anthropology. So from anthropological perspective, we need very little information and we need to have a brief idea of what exactly DNA methylation is, and we need not discuss it in depth at the molecular level. Got it? Similarly, genetic screening, genetic counseling. I think you must you must probably have some idea about genetic counseling, isn't it? You would have seen children or kids in your neighborhood who are suffering from genetic disorders. So their parents would have gone for some genetic counseling, or at least through media, in newspapers or in news, you must have had some heard of genetic counseling somewhere. But I'm not very sure if you've heard of genetic screening. What do you mean by genetic screening? Genetic screening means identifying a disorder in a relatively healthy population. Okay, so we will take a random sample of population. Say you go into a company or an office or an MNC and you conduct random tests over there, or you go into an old age home, or you go into a school or an NGO where you have huge sample of population, and you do certain simple screening tests to identify some diseases which are hidden in that population. So the sole purpose or aim of genetic screening is to unearth the diseases which are underlying in a population, which is we are not able to identify. Okay, so take for example a hospital. Will we do genetic screening in a hospital? No, because we know that in a hospital the people are sick, they have some disease, and that is why they are in the hospital. So we will not be doing genetic screening in a hospital. However, you can take the example of a school, right? So you, many of you all might be wearing spectacles, and if you ask your friends or even yourself, how did you identify that you had a short sight and you had to wear spectacles? Most of you will go tell that there was a medical camp that was conducted in a school or in your college, and there they identified that I had short sight, and they recommended me to consult a ophthalmologist and take and start wearing glasses, isn't it? So this very simple example is a very good example of genetic screening. So what here they will do is some Rotary Club or some hospital, like some Netralaya or some hospital, they will send in few doctors and few nurses to a school wherein these people will conduct screening, right? So they will ask the children to come in a line one after the other. They would have marked a board in a classroom. They would have placed a bench after a certain distance, right? And the students should come one after the other, stand near that bench, which is placed at a distance, and they must read what is written on the board, right? So on the board, they would have written font from very big size to small sizes, just like how I'm sure most of you all would have been to an ophthalmologist, sorry, ophthalmologist, and you would have gone through these tests. So when they ask you to read, probably you'll be able to read the first 3 or 4 lines clearly, and then later when you make errors and you're not able to clearly identify the letters, that is when they will give you a prescription asking you to come for a consultation to their hospital, and further tests will be done, and they will check if you have any problems in your eye, and they will give you spectacles or further treatment depending upon what your problem is. So genetic screening is a very simple screening test done in a mass or a huge population to unearth or identify certain diseases which are hidden in that population. This is called as genetic screening. Here we will not use very elaborate and sophisticated instruments or equipments or tests like say what do you say, the scanning, or very cost effect, very costly, expensive, which requires lot of manpower and highly sophisticated instruments. So we will not be doing any of this. However, we'll be doing very simple tests to identify if there is any diseases or disorders hidden in that population. So about genetic screening also we will be discussing much in depth. Further, I already told you about genetic counseling, right? Genetic counseling is to identify and to counsel people who have either already having certain genetic disorders within their family, or if someone wants to prevent themselves from getting a child or getting a disease from a genetic, in a genetic way, and through lineage, then also we can do genetic counseling. Now I can give you the example of a family wherein there is a child which is suffering from a genetic disorder, and that child has siblings and they want to go for marriage. So now after marriage, when they are going to plan their own child, they will have a concern that what if those genes which have created the genetic disorder in their sibling might get transmitted through them to their child, and what is the possibility of them getting a child who is also suffering from that kind of genetic disorder, isn't it? So in those cases they can consult the doctors who will further suggest them to go for genetic counseling. It is not just in this, even when there is, even before the birth of a child, to identify what is the risk factor, what is the percentage of chances that you might get a child suffering from a genetic disorder, or in cases where a couple already has a child with genetic disorder and they want to plan for a second child, or if there has been some history of genetic disorders in their family, in their joint family, or among their cousins or relatives. So in all these cases they can go ahead with genetic counseling. So still there is lots to discuss about genetic counseling. Since this is just a workshop, I'm giving you brief insights about each of these topics and trying to tell you that these are very, very simple topics which are not very scientific or very technical in nature. Next, human DNA profiling, gene mapping, and genome studying. All of this is one single topic, that is Human Genome Project. We'll be discussing this very in depth. Then we'll also be discussing race and racism, then age, sex, and population variation as genetic marker. So we'll be discussing about the different blood groups, who are the universal donors, acceptor, right? So RH blood grouping, we also know about RH factor, isn't it? That is, the RH comes from rhesus monkey, right? So there are certain antigens on the surface of RBCs. Our blood is composed of red blood corpuscles, which is called as RBC, WBCs, which is white blood corpuscles, and also platelets. So on the surface of RBCs, we have certain proteins, all right? So this is called as RH factor. That is, since it was identified first in the rhesus monkey, it is called as, we have named it as RH. So if there is the presence of these proteins on the surface of the RBC, then we call that blood group as RH positive. And if there is absence of these proteins on the surface of RBC, then we call that person to be RH negative. And the ABO blood grouping and RH blood grouping is very crucial before any blood transfusion. I'm sure many of you all would have at least donated blood to many of the in many places, or if any of your family or friends would have gone for surgery. Usually when some person opts for a surgery, the hospital will ask the family to arrange for some 3 or 4 bottles of blood, isn't it, of the same blood group or different blood group. So either the family members or the relatives, even though they don't have the same blood group as that of the patient, they will still donate blood to the hospital, and then they will take the required blood group which is needed for the patient surgery from the hospital. So during these times, you must have noticed that even before they do the blood transfusion, even before they take the blood, they will do a blood test, isn't it? So it is a very simple test wherein they'll take few drops of blood on a slide, they'll put the agglutinants, and they will rotate the slide and see where there's agglutination. Based on that, we can identify whether it is RH positive, or we can identify whether it is A blood group or B blood group or O, then RH positive, negative. So this is very important whenever there is blood transfusion happening. So we'll be discussing about this. And here we will also be discussing not just what is the blood grouping is, we'll be discussing how it varies across ages, how it varies across sex and population. We all know that across sex, there is a difference in the volume of blood that is present, isn't it? men have comparatively more blood in comparison to women, isn't it? So women have lesser blood and men have more blood. So this is how it is varying across sex, right? Similarly, according to age also, the amount of blood will vary. Same way, according to population, how the blood groups vary, how the various proteins like HLA, immunoglobulin, heptaglobin, transferrin. Trust me, these are all very, very simple terms. We will be discussing what it means, like what HLA, that is human leukocyte antigen, means and how it varies across sexes. That is there a difference in human leukocyte antigen between males and females? And does it vary across different populations? And does it vary according to age? So like this, each of these topics over here, be it human leukocyte antigen, human leukocyte antigen, heptaglobin, transferrin, blood enzymes, all of this. Further, we will also be discussing the hemoglobin level, the body fat level, right? So when you speak of body fat, you must have noticed that the people who are settled around the Gangetic plains have a very thin and lean structure. Whereas if you see the people belonging to the areas such as Rajasthan, these people have a much higher composition of body fat. Have you all noticed this? I'm sure you must have noticed this. So what is the reason behind this? It is that, so now you understand that the body fat level varies across populations and even in different regions of the globe also. You can find in certain countries, normally the normal population or the general population will have much healthier body fat, whereas in some regions of the country or in some other parts or some other countries in the world, you can see that generally the people will be very thin, slim, like this. So what are the reasons for this? Again, it is because of the genetics also, right? So here you can see in North India, people have a much better height, right? Be it men or women, the average height of both men and women in North India is much higher as to what we can see in South India, isn't it? So that is again because of genetics. So you can see what happens in the Gangetic belt is there is surplus food production because it is the Gangetic belt, there is surplus agricultural productivity and there is no shortage or there is no deficiency of food grains throughout the year. So the people had sufficient amount of food over here throughout the year and the body was well fed. There was no reason for the body to store any fat for later times when there is a period of starvation. Whereas if you take the people in Rajasthan, in desert areas, here there is no water supply throughout the year and agriculture is scarce and food productivity or food production is also less, as a result of which, just give me a minute. So here in these regions, desert areas like Rajasthan, as I already told you, there's no water supply, agricultural productivity is not, almost less or no agriculture, there's no adequate supply of food grains throughout the year and there is starvation periods very often. So in these kind of environment, what happens is the body has to conserve, it has to conserve lot amount of fat so that it can be utilized during the times of starvation. And that is why you can find that the people in these regions have a very high percentage of fat deposition in their body. So it is not just the genetic factors or the genes which determine these, it is also the environmental factors also. So we'll be discussing in depth how environment and genetic factors contribute to the variations across age, sex, and population with respect to these physiological characters like hemoglobin level, fat, body fat, pulse rate, respiratory functions, sensory perceptions, and so on. So when we speak about sensory perceptions, how many color terms do we have in our vocabulary in India? Take the example of Hindi or any regional language. If I ask you how many color terms are there for blue, so in Hindi you can say it is neeli or some 2 or 3 more terms for blue. In English, in English we have quite more number of terms. Similarly, you can find that here in tropical regions we have less number of color terms because we have very highly pigmented eyeballs. So how is eyeball pigmentation related to the number of color terms in a language? This is what you must be wondering, right? Yes, it is definitely related. In our tropical areas, we have adequate sunlight, isn't it? Now in Delhi, it is around 43 degrees centigrade, and there's no need for us to, there is no dearth of sunlight at all. So here, even if less sunlight enters into our eyes, that is more than sufficient because we have adequate sunlight throughout the year. So our eyes, that is the people living in tropical countries, our eyes are highly pigmented. That's why our eye color are very dark, isn't it? So you can find generally in Indian population, the eye color is either black or jet black or dark brown or deep brown, right? You cannot find eyeball colors in green or light shades, light brown or blue eyes, right? So whereas these eye colors you can find in the people belonging to Arctic regions or, Scandinavian countries or in cold climatic conditions like Sweden, Denmark, and so on, there you can find most of the population will have very less pigments in their eyes. So their eye color will be either blue or green or light brown because they have very less pigments in their eyes. Why do they have less pigments in their eyes? See, in those countries, it is very difficult to get sunlight. Hardly they have summer for 1 or 2 months in a year. And even the summer which they have for 1 or 2 months is equal to getting very less sunlight. They'll be getting just around the sunlight which we get here in Indian winters. That is the amount of sunlight which they will get in their summers, isn't it? So in those countries, it is an ecological compulsion for the eyes that it has to get in more sunlight. So the eyes are very less pigmented. They have very less pigments in their eyes so that more sunlight can enter into the body. So because of this less amount of pigments in their eyes, they can differentiate more color shades, and that is why they have more color terms. Now say, take the example of red, or you can take the example of purple. So now for purple, we have many colors. We say violet, we say indigo, we say purple, and they also come up with different color terms like cyan, lilac, crimson. So they have more number of color terms because their eyes are capable of differentiating different colors. Whereas we in tropical countries have more amount of pigments in our eyes, as a result of which we can differentiate very few colors. For us, hardly we have some 2 or 3 terms for red color, isn't it? We say red, magenta, maroon, right? Even if you have 10 different shades of red, we can hardly distinguish between them, isn't it? That is because of the high amount of pigments that is present in our eyes. So it is ecology also which determines these. So we'll be discussing all these sensory perceptions in different cultural and socioeconomic groups as well. Then so we'll also discuss a lot about adaptation to genetic and non-genetic factors and man's psychological responses to environmental stresses. So how our physiological responses to environmental stresses, that is how our body adapts to different conditions. Say when during summer, how our body adapts to that during winter, or say we are traveling to a place of high altitude. Say you take up mountaineering and you decide to trek Mount Everest. So usually you will be asked to take 1 month of training in the base camp, isn't it? You cannot just voluntarily walk today and say, I'm going to climb Mount Everest, and you cannot begin. Your body needs to get acclimatized to that environmental conditions, because as you trek upwards, the pressure reduces and your body needs to cope with that. So it's not just about mountaineering. Even if you go to hill stations also, you can find that the very first day when you travel, you will find very tired, you will feel uneasy, you cannot breathe properly because your body is still not acclimatized to the environmental conditions, to the higher altitude. So that is why it is always advisable to travel to hill stations by road and not through flight, isn't it? So many people usually they take flights to hill stations, and first day it becomes very difficult for them to handle. They feel lethargic. It's not because of the travel. Definitely, to a certain extent, it is because of the travel, but in addition, it is because of the high altitude conditions, wherein your body is still not, it is still acclimatizing to those conditions. Whereas by 1 or 2 days, your body has acclimatized well, and you are capable of carrying out all activities. And that is why it is also advised that whenever you are moving to a high altitude area, you should not do much strenuous physical activities like workout or trekking on the same day. It is not advisable, right? So we'll be discussing more in depth about this as well. Then how much more time do we have? Okay. We'll also be discussing about epidemics. Now that So now even a small kid knows what an epidemic is, what a pandemic is, isn't it? So we'll be discussing about a lot number of epidemics which has ravaged the entire world, right? So right from the beginning, like the Surat plague and the other earlier epidemics, all of this we'll be discussing one after the other. We'll be discussing more about health and disease, infectious, non-infectious diseases. Here, when we say infectious and non-infectious disease, we will not be discussing all the infectious diseases which we know, isn't it? So we'll be discussing certain diseases, certain bacterial diseases, certain viral diseases, certain fungal diseases, right? So among even under each of these diseases, we will discuss about what is the disease, what is the causal organism, what is the symptoms, and how we can identify, that is, what are the tests which we conduct to identify this disease, and what is the preventive measures, and what is the treatment options. Okay, so we will be categorizing the different diseases based on the causal organism. So what are the diseases caused by viruses? What are the diseases caused by bacteria, protozoan, fungi? What are the communicable diseases? What are the non-communicable diseases? What are lifestyle-related diseases like diabetes, diabetes mellitus, cancer, and a few STDs like HIV, AIDS. So all of this, just like how a high school student would study, right? Most of you definitely have a very good idea about this, at least the basic diseases. And here we'll be discussing the important points like what is a causal organism, what is the symptoms of the disease, what are the tests which we can conduct, what is the mode of transmission, and what is the preventive measures and the treatment options available, right? So these are very, very important even from your GS perspective for your prelims. So even from your GS and the prelims perspective, these diseases are very, very important, right? So we'll be discussing each of this in brief. Further, we'll move on to human growth and development and biological and social factors influencing fecundity, fertility, natality, mortality, and various fertility patterns and differentials, menarche, menopause. These are very, very simple and yet interesting topics. Okay. And applications of anthropology also. Further, moving on to paper 2. In paper 2, we discuss about Indian culture and civilization and the demographic profile of India. We'll be beginning with caste system in Indian society. So what is caste? How is the caste determined? What are the various theories of origin of caste? So we have various theories. One is the Purusha Sukta hymn. Okay, so it is called as the traditional or Indological theory. So this traditional or ideological theory is the most widely believed theory for the origin of caste. So it has got even divine approval. That is, it has been approved. It is believed that this traditional ideological theory has got approval from the gods himself, right? It has been mentioned in the Purusha Sukta hymn of the Rig Vedas. So what does this theory say? This theory says that the Lord Brahma, who is the creator of this universe, he resorted to self-destruction. That is, he self-destroyed his body, and different body parts, different groups of people came, and they are called as castes, right? So like this, we'll be discussing very, very simple topic. And one important thing before I discuss the topics in paper 2, I would like to tell this. Mostly students make this mistake. That is, what students do is they take paper 2 very lightly. They know that paper 2 is easy. Yes, definitely. Even I say that paper 2 is very, very easy in comparison to paper 1. But that doesn't mean you have to completely neglect paper 2. I have witnessed many students take paper 2 very lightly. They score exceptionally well in paper 1 because they study all the apes part thoroughly. They go to the physical anthropology thoroughly. They study the culture theories properly, and they make very good answers, and they score exceptionally well in paper 1. However, they consider paper 2 as very easy, so they hardly put any efforts. They just take the materials some 1 week before the exam. They just glance through it, and they appear for the examination, and ultimately it has costed them very badly. They do not even manage to score by 100, right? So it becomes very difficult. Please understand, even if paper 2 is very easy, the marks for paper 1 and paper 2 is both equal, isn't it? Just because you prepared very well, exceptionally well for paper 1, you're not going to get you're not going to have paper 1 examination for 500 marks, isn't it? You have equal number of marks for both paper 1 and paper 2. And what I will advise you is, please give equal importance to both the papers from the very beginning. Even though paper 2 is easy, give equal importance and study it properly so that you do not lose marks considering it to be very easy and regret later. Fine. So here we'll be discussing about caste system. What is caste system? Theories of origin of caste. What is a dominant caste? Right. So is there a future of caste system? What is the present relevance of caste system? That is, presently, do people still believe in caste system? Do they give importance for caste system? Does it hold much importance or political mileage? So all of this, and further, how is it going to change in the future? We'll be discussing much about all this. Then we'll also be discussing about various religions in our country, right? Religions like Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, which had origin in our Indian country. And we'll also be discussing about the religions which came into our country from outside, like Christianity and Islam, right? So what are these religions, how they came into our country, then how they have impacted our Indian society, like what are the contributions of various religions. Take the example of Christianity. The contribution of Christianity in the education and healthcare sector in our country is huge, isn't it? You can find that most of the best educational institutions, be it convents, schools, convents, or colleges, these are run by Christian missionaries. Same is the case with hospitals also. You might have heard of many hospitals like St. Teresa's Hospital, St. Mark's Hospital. So many hospitals, you can find most of the contribution of Christianity in healthcare and education sector. So like this, we will be discussing how different religions like Islam, Hinduism, Christianity, Sikhism, Buddhism, Jainism, how all of these have contributed to our Indian society, and also how they have contributed for the development or the welfare of the tribal population as well. So how they impacted the tribal population. You can see that most of the Central Indian tribes are converted to, they are converted to Hinduism. Not converted, they adopted Hinduism. Whereas you can find that most of the tribes in Northeast, they have converted to Christianity. Whereas if you see the tribes in Andaman and Nicobar and Lakshadweep Islands, you can find that they are moving towards Islam, right? So like this, how each of these religions have not just contributed to our Indian society, but how they have brought about a change in the tribal population, and how was the transformation of this tribal population towards the religion, and how it has impacted their lives. Has it made their lives better? Have they come out of poverty? Are there any development that is happening, be it at their society or at their educational or different parameters like education, healthcare, in terms of in terms of betterment of women's life. So like this, we'll be discussing how each of these religions have impacted the Indian society as well as the tribal population. Then we'll also be discussing about traditions, like the traditions which we follow, how we can classify them into great traditions and little tradition. So whether there is movement of traditions that is happening, right? What are the traditions? We can say that worshipping God, worshipping temples, worshipping, visiting temples, visiting places of pilgrimage. All these are traditions, isn't it? So we'll be discussing more about what are great traditions, what are less traditions, little traditions, and how they interact, so on. Then coming to tribal studies. Tribal studies is very, very interesting topic in paper 2 anthropology. We'll be discussing a lot about different tribes in Northeast, different Central Indian tribes, the tribes in Andaman and Nicobar. We'll be discussing about particularly vulnerable tribal groups, or PTG. PTG means primitive tribal group, and now it has been renamed as particularly vulnerable tribal group. That is, see, there are certain tribes who have got very well assimilated into the mainstream society. Like, say, for example, I can give you the example of the Minas. Minas are originally a tribal group. You can mostly find them in Rajasthan, in this region. But if you find any Meena in present day, you can find Meenas occupying very high positions in government offices, in private sector. They are highly educated and they have assimilated into the mainstream sector very, very long back, and they are very well into the mainstream society. Whereas we have still very primitive tribes who are still living in the pre-agricultural level of technology. Like take, for example, the Jaravas, the Jenukurbas, the Halukurbas, the Sentinelese, the Onge. All these tribes are considered as PTGs, or particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Why? Because these groups have not yet assimilated into the mainstream society, and they are still living in a primitive way of life. That is, they are living in a pre-agricultural level of technology. The educational level is almost they are living very backward, almost no education, and they are still doing their primitive occupations, and most of them are still living in the jungles. So these people are classified separately from the rest of the tribes who are very well advanced and who are very well assimilated into the mainstream society. So these group, which we call as PTG or PVTG, have been given different developmental programs and policies for their welfare, because the needs of these people are entirely different from the needs of the other tribes who are very well assimilated into the mainstream society. So we'll be discussing about each and every tribe, like the Jaravas, the Honge, the Central Indian tribes, the Northeastern tribes. What is the unique about these tribes? Why is it so difficult for any development or displacement activities? Most of the times you would have read in current affairs and newspapers about the various policies and programs and the plans which the government and in association with the Ministry of Tribal Affairs, it formulates many policies and plans and programs for the welfare of the tribal population. Still, anytime when there's a displacement or displacement of the tribal population, or for any other issues, you can find the tribes coming out and protesting against the government. So now you might be wondering, what is it that the tribes are lacking? Why is it there's no coordination between what the government is offering and what the tribes actually need, isn't it? So there's a wide gap between what the actual needs of the tribes are and what the government is providing. And that is why you can find the tribal population coming out in protests. So you can find there are various there are problems that the tribes face. Okay, like we'll be discussing more about the problems like the land alienation, poverty, indebtedness. Okay, and why is it difficult for us to rehabilitate and resettle the tribal population? So we'll be discussing many interesting case studies for this. So recently I discussed few case studies in my class wherein, will you believe that there are very, very simple reasons why the tribes do not take up the, whenever there is a displacement that happens, the government relocates the population. Say, for example, there was a stretch of forest which was converted to a tiger reserve, or it was converted to a conserved or a protected forest, or the land was acquired for some project, be it for mining or for multi-purpose project, for hydroelectricity generation, for whatever purpose, a particular patch of land was acquired by the government, and the people who were displaced from that land were relocated to some other region. So what the government does is it creates colonies over there with proper houses, and the government relocates these people to this region. But what happens is the tribes who move to those places, they hardly stay there for few weeks or even few days. Then after a few months or a year, if you go visit those rehabilitation colonies, you can see that none of the people are actually living there. In fact, they would have grabbed whatever they can take from that, be it the windows and the doors, and they would have sold that, and they would have moved out of that region, and they would have settled in some other place. So when you discuss these case studies, you will find some reasons which might seem very, very silly and which might even seem funny for us. But that is not actually the case for the tribal population. Those are very, very important sentiments and their beliefs. Like, let me give you an example. So there was this case study. Much details about the case study we'll be discussing in the classes because we are running short of time now. So there was a resettlement colony which was created by the government, and few tribes were relocated to that colony. And what happened was, most of the tribes which were relocated over there, they left the colonies and they moved to other places. And when the anthropologists went and did a research to identify what exactly were the problems that these people faced there and why did they move out, they gave a number of reasons. So there is one tribal community which says that whenever there is a childbirth which happens, so say in their tanda or in their community, whenever a woman gives birth to a child, they observe pollution rituals for up to 6 days. That is, that entire community, nobody will do any worship, and they will observe strict practices of pollution, and the woman will be given a separate hut outside of the house. She has to stay there, and after 6 days, on the 7th day, there will be purification rituals which are conducted, and only after that the woman along with the baby can enter into the main house. Okay. And in another community, similarly, the tribe follow this practice, pollution rituals, such that the woman will stay inside the house, but she cannot use the same door which is used by the other members belonging to the family. So in these cases, there has to be a provision made such that there are 2 houses for every family, or in a single family, there should be 2 doors for them to follow these rituals of pollution and purity. However, the houses which the government made were just regular houses with a single door. So it was difficult for the tribes to follow their rituals over there, and hence they deserted that place and moved out. Still, there are few more reasons why other tribes moved out. So there is one tribe which believes that there is one tribe which believes that they should not have any windows inside the house. So their belief is that if there is a window in the house, it is an entry point for spirits to enter inside the house. The government houses which were present in a colony had windows and a single door. So when the tribes went there, they did not want to live over there because they believed that through these windows, the spirits will enter inside the house, and hence they fled those colonies. There was yet another tribe which believed that there should be two doors in the house. So when a child is born, the woman will not use the common main door. Instead, she will use the alternate door. Their belief is that this will protect the child from being beaten or eaten by tigers and other evil spirits. Whereas in the government provided houses, there was a single door and they did not have the provision to fulfill all these rituals of purification and pollution and their beliefs. So like this, these beliefs or rituals of pollution and purity might seem very simple and very casual for us, but it is a very essential part of the tribal culture, and their culture means a lot to them, right? So like this, in depth, we'll be discussing many interesting factors about the tribal life, their marriage, their belief system, their religion, like animism, animatism, bongaism, ho-bongaism, manaism. What do you mean by mana? That is belief in a supernatural power, belief that anything and everything, it might be a living object or a non-living object. Say it might be the glass which is here, right? Or it might be the table here, or it might be the remote. We believe that it has supernatural powers, or it might be a tree in the forest, or it might be a huge rock. They have the belief that this particular object, whether it is animate or inanimate, has some supernatural powers, and that is called as mana, right? So we'll be discussing so many interesting topics in tribal life and tribal culture. You wouldn't even realize how much of topics and syllabus we'll be covering when we start discussing these topics. And in fact, you people will get more curious and read more and tell me more facts and new things which I don't know about the tribal life. So we are already running short of time. I hope so you have at least a brief idea about what anthropology is and how your anthropology journey will be so exciting and curious. Hope to meet you soon in our anthropology lectures. Until we meet in our anthropology lectures, I wish you all the very best. Take care. Bye. Have a good day.